Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and on this episode of the Gauntlet, I want to talk about Dragon Tricksters. This week we'll be taking a look at two rage quit inducing combinations, and I'm going to go on record predicting that this team will have the longest matches. It's pretty obvious what this team is trying to do. Make other players miserable by making bases as undesirable as possible. Let's go over the candidates for making this possible. 2 copies of Runes, which can deny a VP to your opponent. Pay the Piper, which forces an opponent to discard a card after they play a minion there. Dangerous Ground, which requires the discard to be up front and is often worse than Pay the Piper. The Big Funny Giant also acts as a Dangerous Ground, but rewards you if other players avoid that base. You have the Leprechaun, which can block the plays of lower powered minions on its base. You have Flame Trap, which can destroy a minion of any power once. You have Block the Path, which can literally block the plays of half of your opponent's minions on its base. You have the freedom of combining these cards however you want. Do you want to make every base undesirable so that a player picks their poison? You can do that. Do you want to ward off one base completely and force them to compete on 4-3-2 bases? You can do that as well. I once completely walled off Rhodes Plaza Mall and focused all my minions there, settling for easy second place finishes to gain supplemental VP and using runes to prevent any surprises. I view the play on base actions as puzzle pieces that you can rearrange as you see fit, deciding which base to politely allow your opponent to have a presence. But these cards supplement each other well in ways that go beyond annoyance. Normally, I prefer to hold on to my dragon specials because I love stealing bases when it's not my turn, but there's something really tempting about using them in Phase 2. The Hatchling doesn't really combine well with the Leprechaun, because the current player can choose the order and do the Leprechaun first, then the Hatchling, to avoid the reduction. But Intimidating Presence is an immediate reduction, which happens before the Leprechaun is resolved, so it treats the Leprechaun like a virtual 6. Dragonlands can make it so that he's an actual 6, so you can use either to make it harder to get minions past the Leprechaun, or use both to make it virtually impossible. You would need to use a base action modifier to do this, which you can conveniently disenchant, and if they try to move a minion there, you can draw a card for it, while they still get the reduction. The dragons can combine with the tricksters for last minute destruction. Even if they manage to slip a minion through, a last minute gnome can be played with Bring Down the Walls to destroy a small powered minion. Given how great the penalty is for playing on their bases, a player may not have many minions there, so 2 gnomes can potentially take them all out. I don't like using wyverns for this, but you also have that option. You can also take a page out of the fairy playbook and disenchant your own negative action as a way of adding power. You can use that action to slow the bases down, then speed it up according to your tempo. And I really like that Flank Attack has the flexibility to get any play on base action that best suits your situation, both those that hurt others and those that help you. I've always appreciated how dragons are subtly the anti-swarm faction, particularly with the hatchlings. If you load up hatchlings on a base, their abilities stack, making it really hard for a swarm-based attack. These attacks tend to rely on multiple minions played on the same turn, and hatchling buys you time. But the power reduction will expire, which means that there is a lot of breakpoint, and you can immediately overtake them in a number of ways. You have Enshrouding Mists, which are great for wyverns because you can destroy a minion and reduce the breakpoint to make up the difference. You can also use Intimidating Presence to reduce a lot of power after the breakpoint has tripped. Bring Down the Walls could have been seeded in advance, and Great Worm is the perfect finisher when a player overspends on second place. Having a player think that they could win for 4 points, only to walk away with 1 is fantastic for one of you. It's also really hard to storm a base with a swarm faction when every minion played is costing you between 1 to 3 additional cards. Even if they manage to pull it off, Take the Shinies can remove what few cards they have left. If you remember from last year, Take the Shinies crippled the dragons, so it's kind of fitting that the dragons acquired that ability this year. If you can play an Imperial Dragon on every base, you get at least an extra card every turn. Or, if a Swarm player decides to go nuts on your Imperial Dragon base, you can draw an absurd number of cards each turn, and Enshrouding Mist can help you play many of those cards. Enshrouding Mists are great for those low-powered gremlins that can gain extra power from Dragonlands. As your opponent decides which base to pursue, you could proceed on 2 or more of them because Enshrouding Mist is a great double feature. One of the great things about this team is that you shouldn't be wasting a play. Play on base actions are among the easiest actions to play, so you should be using every minion and every action play that you have. If you manage to get additional plays, this combination becomes even more brutal, as you can expedite your creation of their punishment. And I do like that this combination is rounded out by a few good utility cards. Burn It Down is always good to have in your back pocket, particularly because it can use a base from the discard pile. If you have a minion-heavy base without many of your actions, you can burn that base into something with a smaller breakpoint so that you can surprise an opponent, or turn a base into a 4/3/2 base. Raise is the type of underrated action that is always good to have, especially on a base like Worm's Desolation. Mark of Sleep doesn't scale for multiplayer, but it is strong in 2-player. And while 2 copies of Disenchant doesn't make sense all the time, you may want to use it on yourself, and you should be guaranteed to see at least one of them for an action that cannot be allowed to live. While this combination may make life miserable, it has some very entertaining counters that bring it back down to earth. Many of these counters rely on specific factions rather than overall archetypes, but you can approach this match from so many different vantage points that it really doesn't matter. I, for one, will never get tired of terraforming whatever base the Leprechaun is on into Cave of Shinies, and then throwing minion after minion on there to farm VP. Terraforming also removes all the actions, which is a further bonus. While this faction is great at preventing minion plays, factions that are action heavy are going to be largely undeterred. 2 disenchants won't be enough to keep the kaiju at bay, and radioactive breath can rip through the hatchlings. The kaiju can destroy a decent number of actions to take a bit out of the team's strength. The steampunks can destroy and prevent the playing of play-on-base actions, which provides them with a safe haven, since they can move to other bases anyway. If your opponent can already bring minions into play, this faction cannot do much to stop them from growing. Action-based power boosts work equally well, as the best that the dragons can do is try to overtake you with specials or just subtract a VP. This combination has no way to protect their precious actions, so a faction like the Grannies can counter them well. In addition to being able to avoid some of the effects, the Grannies have one of the best action destruction cards in Knitting Circle, which can purge several actions and draw several cards as a result. And since they can recur this action, while the Dragon Tricksters have very little recursion, it's possible that they can eliminate the threat from actions entirely and focus only on minions, and this combination cannot necessarily compete on the same level. Even if you manage to play a lot of actions, El Bandito can rearrange them. Worse, he can take control of them, as can Hotwire. You thought I was going to be the one who loses VP? Think again. If you were already conceding second place on a base, you may as well transfer as many actions there as possible to form an extremely undesirable base, except that it's the one that I want, not the Dragon Tricksters. Note that you cannot use Cab over Repeat to transfer a minion as opposed to moving it, because minions cannot be transferred. But perhaps the most ironic counter is the Exploragers. By increasing the number of bases, something I normally despise, you effectively create new areas that the Dragon Tricksters have not yet corrupted. Area control factions suffer when they have more ground to cover, and it's possible for the Exploragers to more than double the number of bases at the start, which means that you will have to adapt accordingly. They can score a base by themselves that the dragons cannot interrupt, because they require a presence on a base in order to do anything. I think that Dragon Tricksters are well equipped to compete with certain factions that would be considered overpowered, while being susceptible to others who can approach the game in different ways, and that adds a lot of intrigue for the tournament. There are going to be interesting games because there are some brutal combinations of actions that you can make. What do you think of Dragon Tricksters? Let me know in the comments. That's it for this team. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.